welcome back to the Red Door Analytics course, Survival Analysis, an Introduction to Concepts, Methods and Software. In this section, we're going to talk about the basic concept. So the basic concept of survival analysis is that we are following data that follows individuals or observations over time until the occurrence of an event of interest. This is also termed time to event analysis, and there are two key components. The first being the event of interest, and the second being the time aspect. So we could have a scale that looks like this, where we follow individuals or observations across a time scale until an event of interest. So we have to define an event, and this has to be unambiguous when performing survival analysis. This is a binary outcome, so it's either yes or no, or 1 or 0, but it doesn't need to be death, yes or no, as suggested in the survival analysis term. In our example data set, we are looking at death, but it does not need to be this outcome. It just needs to be a binary outcome. So some examples of this would be diagnosis of AIDS, yes or no, death due to cancer, yes or no, or it could be, if we go outside of the medical field, something such as motor failure. So if we're looking at cars, for example, and we're interested in saying, did this car have failure of their motor or not, yes or no? As long as the outcome is a yes or no variable. So the other important aspect for survival analysis is the time component. So we have to define this very clearly when performing a survival analysis. And what do we mean by time? Well, if we take the example of time since breast cancer diagnosis to death, then we would have a timescale that looks something like this, where we have a clearly defined start at breast cancer diagnosis, and then we follow across time here, which is in years, until the event of death. So we define a timescale using a very clearly defined start and stop time, and the stop time is defined by our event and also something called censoring, which we will cover in one of the sections later on in the course. So some examples of this could be time from HIV diagnosis to a diagnosis of AIDS, where we start our timescale at the HIV diagnosis or infection, and then we follow them across time until the diagnosis of AIDS, which is our event of interest. So that's our start and stop time. If we think about time from diagnosis of cancer until death due to cancer, we start following those individuals at the diagnosis of cancer. That's our start of our timescale. Follow them across time until their death due to cancer, our event of interest. And if we go back to our motor failure example, we could be interested in a timescale where we follow from car purchase. So that would be our start time, and we follow them across this timescale until the event of interest, motor failure. Now, there are lots of time terminologies which can be a little confusing. There's something called time at risk, follow-up time, person time, and time scale. Now, these concepts are interrelated, some of them more than others. They're not all the same thing, and we will come back to defining what these are. So that's it for this section of the course. There's some further reading here if you would like to do that. Otherwise, I will see you in the next section.